Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
Peace and blessings, I'm Mielle.
All right, coming up on today's report, Oklahoma Parole's board recommends clemency for Julius Jones. We've been following the case. His sister and pastor are here to discuss what's next. Plus, we're talking with Coach Cornell Ward and Jeffrey Koprick over criticism over an Inglewood High School football game score. You're going to want to hear this story.
Plus, we have your election updates. Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he plans to bring the John Lewis voting rights bill to the Senate floor. And Kobe Bryant's estate reportedly gains a $400 million payday. We'll tell you more.
We have that and so much more. You know why? Because it's our voice and our truth. So let's talk about it.
Soulmates, good evening. Thank you for joining us. The attorney of one of the men charged with murder in the death of Ahmaud Arbery plans to file a motion saying his defendant is not facing a jury of his peers. NBC News reporting Kevin Go, who's representing William Roddy Bryan. He's the man accused of filming the pursuit and the killing. His lawyer says, quote, "It would appear that white males born in the South over 40 years old without a college degree, which he might also be known as Bubba or Joe Sixpack, seem to be significantly underrepresented." Now, he said this during jury selection Friday. He also says he wants to look at whether this group constitutes a constitutionally protected class of people who cannot be discriminated against. You know, this has been so interesting. It's actually not getting as much information as you may assume it would. And many experts online seem to think it's because people think it's a parody. People do not believe this actually happened, but there is actually video of this happening. And we always have civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson here on the show. I talked to her about this, and she said, look at the other defense attorneys. Go back, look at the video, look at the other people on his team. It says a lot. The other attorneys on his team are kind of have these almost in shock or frustrated, or I mean, it is a fascinating argument that's happening. And what's interesting is that, he hasn't filed this paperwork, hasn't filed this motion. But at this point, I think many people are interested to see what the outcome would be if he filed a motion, at some point trying to argue that white men are underrepresented.
I don't understand why he feels like he needs to be amongst a certain group of people. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And it seems as if they're trying to pick at straws right now and trying to find a reason to say that the justice system cheated them in this particular situation. So his lawyers, who you were just talking about, the lawyers are saying that black media is affecting the outcome of what's going on. And so I think even if the black media is or is not affecting, good job, black media. Round of applause for black media, because so many times we as the black community, when we're on trial, we get the short end of the stick because we think that the justice system is going to do their job. They're going to do it right. This time they're not going to be, race is not going to be a factor. Yeah. So, hey, if black media is influencing this, good job, black media, because how many times has Trump used his resources to his advantage? All the time.
This is the story of black Americans when it comes to the judicial system. We're never judged by our peers. That's why so many black and brown people are incarcerated. So, now they see how it feels when you don't have a box of 12 being judged by your peers. I mean, it's the story. It's whether we choose as black people not to participate, or when we do decide to show up, we get X'd out because we are just not compatible to what the defense or the prosecutor is looking for. So now they know how it feels.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. A Minnesota judge has denied a defense request to dismiss the most serious charges against a former suburban Minneapolis police officer who said she meant to use a taser instead of a handgun when she fatally shot black motorist Dante Wright. Now, former Brooklyn Senator police officer Kim Porter will stand trial on first-degree and second-degree manslaughter charges in the death of Wright, who was shot after being stopped April 11th for a traffic violation. This story drew large media attention because it was during the time of the George Floyd trial. And, you know, people were just already on pins and needles because of it. And then for this to happen and for her to say that she chose to, it was an accident. She put her she put a gun instead of her taser. I know we had Mayor James Butts from the city of Inglewood, California here, and he kind of said that, you know, sometimes that happens, but for her to be on trial, it falls into the conversation of qualified immunity and so many other things. So it's good that the courts, you know, are holding her to the fire and holding her accountable. And manslaughter is a less charge when you look at homicide. So I think that the charges were justified.
You know, I think about this situation, and she's a 26-year veteran, right? Mm-hmm. So, and when you have this position, when you're a police officer, you can't make mistakes. There's certain jobs you just cannot afford to make mistakes. This is a simple traffic stop. Yes, he may have tried to get away, but just seeing his aunt today on TV talking about, look, he didn't kill anyone. He didn't get the opportunity to go get Burger King. He was simply, it was a traffic stop. He was trying to get away. Yeah, he may have been nervous, but he was a good young man, and unfortunately his life was lost, and you can't bring that back. So no matter what the outcome is, you cannot bring his life back, and that's the saddest part about this.
And you know, that's again part of the conversation that people are often having when it comes to how they want to deal with policing and the future of policing in this country. Obviously, you know, we're looking to Minnesota and the decision coming out of Minnesota later today, or today, excuse me. But, you know, that's the discussion that is often had between different sects of activists looking for different things. You know, police abolitionists say that's the point. This all has to stop. We're not focusing on punishment. We're not focusing on changes. We're focusing on no more lives lost. And, you know, at this point, you know, the more you see this, unfortunately, that, you know, for a lot of people to even kind of think, okay, maybe things need to change in any way, it's taken so many people, so many families to be absolutely devastated, you know, and we're talking about these stories over and over again. And that's the thing that I always come back to, is that there are children without their fathers, there are mothers without their sons, girlfriends and wives without their partners, sisters without their brothers, and so on. And that's the horrifying part of the story.
Definitely.
I have zero sympathy when it comes to cases like this, when it comes to cops, no more. I have no more sympathy because she acted recklessly. And like you said, Romeo, there are certain jobs that you can't afford to have a mistake. But what I'm also looking forward to seeing with this is that, so back in August, a judge denied a request for cameras to be inside of the courtroom. And so now a coalition of media outlets, including the AP, they're coming together and pretty much trying to push back. They pushed back yesterday, I believe, trying to see if they can get cameras in the courtroom for public interest, of course. People want to see what's going on, but also COVID-19. So that's another little piece of the puzzle that I'm hoping in a few days or weeks we'll find out if cameras are allowed inside the courtroom for this. On to our next story here. So after serving 26 years in prison for 2 armed robberies he says that he did not commit, Chad Breland, he was released from Woodbourne Correctional Facility last week. Judge Michelle Johnson granted a joint motion filed by Queens District Attorney Melinda Cutts. Now, her conviction integrity unit and Breland's attorney to vacate the Far Rockaway man's conviction and sentence related to the second of the 2 robberies. Excuse me. So the motion came after the CIU discovered new evidence that tied another man to the November 1995 crime. Fingerprints on the outside of one of the windows of the home that was robbed were later found to match the criminal informant who first told police Breland was the perpetrator. Though the NYPD found the match, the DA's office said the information was never passed along to prosecutors.
83-year-old Isaiah Andrews was acquitted Wednesday after spending 45 years in prison for his wife's murder, which he always maintained he did not commit. A jury in Cleveland deliberated for less than 90 minutes before declaring Andrews not guilty in his second trial for the 1974 slaying of Regina Andrews. She had been stabbed 11 times in a hotel, her bed linen swathed body dumped into a forest park, according to WOIO-TV. One of the first things the newly seated jury learned was something the first set of jurors never been told before. Police had initially arrested another man in the killing of Isaiah Andrews had already been released last year after a judge ruled that prosecutors failed to let a jury know in 1975 that another suspect had been interviewed, the Associated Press reported. Key evidence that was withheld. So if you think about this, we're talking 83 years old, 45 years. So he went in, if I do my math right, he was 38 years old, right? Mm-hmm. All is lost when you think about that. Here's a man that never gave up, that could have given up so many times, but imagine going through that day in and day out, what that does to you mentally, the stress that puts on you and your family that's trying to fight and hold on with you. These are decades. And finally, he gets a chance to go free because of something as simple as what they did not tell the first jury.
You know what, I didn't get a chance to talk about the Chad Breland story. So with him, what was interesting about both of these stories, of course, but with Chad's story specifically, he did a lot of his own research when he was in jail, which was so powerful. And so just, you know, imagine being in jail for so many years, Romeo, like you just said, and having to know in your heart, in the deepest part of your heart, that you're innocent. And so with Chad's story, him doing all of his, imagine him trying to wonder how is he going to prove to a judge and prove to lawyers that he didn't do this. And so I think that we've seen more and more stories like these last two, that now we should start investigating the judges who prosecuted and who sent these men to jail, because what was going through your mind? Why didn't you get all of the facts? Why didn't you do a deeper investigation? You know, I think that should be a next level to this now, because we've been seeing it more and more. A lot of men are getting off and they didn't do it. So why were they there in the first place? Money is just not going to be enough now.
The accountability has to be put on to the police officers as well as the district attorney's offices, because in both of these instances, one was the police officers didn't give the information to the prosecutor's office. And then you may have a prosecutor who knows this information, but they don't present it to the jurors. So along with the judges, the prosecutors have to be held accountable as well as the police officers. And then this also shows how they see us and how they disregard the meaning of our lives. Let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery. His attorney point blank said he needs to have Billy Bob Joe and cousin Jack on the juror in order for this man to have a fair trial. But when you look at these two cases, two black men, there was no regard of making sure that they had jurors that were their peers. And then you have the police departments and the prosecutor's office, you know, not providing information. This goes to the bigger conversation of how we need criminal justice reform in this country. And it's not just the prisons, but taking a deep dive into police departments as well as the district attorney's office.
All right. We have an interview coming up next, right? We're having some technical issues here, but I want to get to this for you. So the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 3-1 Monday, recommending commuting the death sentence of Julius Jones to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Of course, we have been following the story here on the show. You'll remember the Pardon and Parole Board first recommended commuting Jones' sentence back in September. A week later, an execution date was set, with the governor saying that wasn't the right policy, that wasn't the right procedure. We are in the future now. So joining us right now, very important and very excited and happy to have you here today, Julius Jones' sister, Antoinette Jones, as well as Pastor Michael McBride of the Black Church PAC. Thank you both so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Antoinette, I want to start with you just right off the top, your thoughts when you all got the decision yesterday.
I was overjoyed, but I also understood that we still have a huge battle to go, which means we have to have everyone on board making those calls to our honorable Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, continue to call in and let him know that his board for the second time voted 3-1 in favor of life with the possibility of parole. So we are asking him to adopt that recommendation. So I'm humbled, but I'm focused that we still have a fight. We still have to finish this fight.
How's your brother doing?
He's doing really good. He let me know he was nervous about yesterday. He was like, was I talking too fast? And I was like, you were talking just right, brother. And everyone was saying how impactful it was just to hear from him, because a lot of them haven't heard from him over 22 years. So it was very impactful. And then upon learning some of the things that he talked about, like, I didn't know he was going through that at the age of, 18 and 19. So it's a blessing that God made it possible for Julius to talk on his own behalf for the first time in over 22 years.
Any word from the governor, especially on the note of next steps?
No, she worked out.
There has been no word yet, but we're still we're still hopeful that he will have a statement soon. We're hopeful that he will have a decision soon.
I appreciate that. I just once again want to say I appreciate you being here. Pastor McBride, I want to bring you in here. I know you've been traveling back and forth to Oklahoma from California. Why is this so important for you to be a part of this campaign to get a man, Julius Jones, off of death row? Why has this been so important to you personally?
Well, first of all, it's important to realize that as a faith leader, follower of Jesus, we have no moral right to take the life of anyone. The scripture says that God has no pleasure in the death of anyone, the wicked or the good. And so it is our responsibility in real time to not just protest life when it's taken by the hands of the state. It's our responsibility to protest and make sure life is not taken. We've been all over the country responding to the deaths of Black men and Black women and loved ones at the hands of the police. I feel like it was important for us to be lifting our voice on the front end and literally save an innocent man's life. Julius Jones is innocent. We heard him proclaim his innocence. This trial was fraught with all kind of inconsistencies, all kind of expressions of racial hatred and animus. There is no reason why the state of Oklahoma should be attempting to execute Julius Jones, given the mismanagement and injustice in this case. We ought to all speak up. And we plan to make sure all of our faith leaders and churches across the country do so over the next couple of weeks.
Antoinette, I want to go back to you because I actually personally, I'm from Oklahoma, born and raised in Muskogee. And so, seeing this story make national news has been a bit of a surprise for me, because it would not be shocking for a story about criminal justice, a story about, changes, a story about a family speaking out about something, two families essentially speaking out about something in Oklahoma for no one to know about, right? That would not be shocking on a national stage. But this case has gotten so much attention. And so I'm curious, I wanted to ask you what it's been like to see so much support from so many people. I saw recently the Golden State Warriors in Oklahoma, supporting your family. What has that been like for you?
It has been a blessing. Man, God is awesome. What I will say to you is, over the course of 22 years, we have not had this support. We've not had people leaning in like this. It was very hard at the beginning. We had a lot of no's. We had a lot of people scared. But for the community to step up upon hearing about the last offense in 2017, and that documentary was so impactful. And even to this day, we appreciate Viola Davis and Julius Tenen for leaning in. We appreciate Vanessa Potkins and Idea Linsenring, because if not for that documentary, I don't think a lot of people would have truly known about the facts in Julius's case, about his innocence. They would not have known. They would have thought that, well, this man was convicted, so he was guilty. But this documentary let people know that there is something wrong with the system, and that even though the system was placed, for American people, it is not consistent for our community. It does not mirror today's people. And there needs to be change within that system. And it starts with actually having our rights, our due process, a jury of our peers. That is common in our community for young Black men especially, but for poor, reduced people that don't have resources, they get a lot of jurors that are not of their peers. They don't have a lot of, in our state, they don't have a lot of people that are familiar with capital murder cases. There's not a lot of lawyers that are experienced in that. That was a great issue within Julius's case early on, because after he had a really tenacious lawyer in the beginning, Mr. Albert Berry, I think I'm saying his name wrong, but Mr. Berry, he passed. And after he passed, we were appointed an attorney that was not familiar with capital murder cases. So Julius did not have adequate counsel. I could go on about our amendments that Julius did not receive as an American citizen, but for the community to step in and lean in of all walks of life, we have Catholic, we have unorthodox, just you name it. Like, God has connected everybody, and this has been a beautiful moment, but it's been humbling, and like I was saying, I have to stay focused. Like I truly am appreciative to every celebrity that has, you know, lit the fire that the Oklahomans have started. I forever will be grateful for Reverend C.C. Jones Davis, especially Pastor Mike McBride. But I'm appreciative to everybody because every effort has mattered. It has truly taken all of us to free an innocent Black man named Julius Darius Jones. When evidence has continued to point out his innocence. So we're praying that our governor makes the right decision, and that right decision is commuting Julius' sentence to life with the possibility of parole, because that is what the Pardon and Parole Board recommended for the second time.
Antoinette, I just want to ask you one more question, because we are having, you know, everything that you just talked about, right? So much attention on this, the documentary, and how everything is kind of blown up since then. But the person at the center of this, we don't get to hear from him often, right? And so you told us a little bit about how Julius has been, you know, in recent days. I would actually like to know from you, because I think there's something that you often hear in cases like this, and the person who is imprisoned, the human being who is in prison, often becomes this space of strength and support for his family, right? And so I'm curious to know if Julius has been that for you and your family.
Oh, continuously. We go visit him on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he asks before we can ask how he's doing, he's asking how we're doing, if we're, you know, taking care of our health, you know. And I'm here trying to encourage him, and he continues to encourage us and ask how we're doing. He has always been that way growing up. The person he is, he would not take a life. He would protect the life. That is who my brother is. He is kind, courageous. But to hear him yesterday tell his testimony, that was impactful. And I'm glad he was able to communicate, articulate his innocence, and be able to talk to the family and let them know, you know, it truly is heartbreaking for Mr. Paul Scott Howe's family, because they were not told the truth in the beginning. They were told half-truths, and they received the correct information on September the 13th, and they received correct information on November the 1st. And I can't even fathom how they feel about being lied to for so long. But what I will say is that I'm blessed that my brother was able to speak, and I appreciate God so much that he was able to tell them that he did not commit this crime, had no parts in it.
Thank you so much again for being here. Pastor McBride, before we go, can you talk to us about your national faith call happening this evening?
Well, we are attempting to organize and mobilize faith leaders from all across the country. So excited tonight at 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 Central Time, to have a call hosted by our Black faith leaders, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Pastor Tracy Blackman, Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes, Reverend C.C. Jones Davis. Join us at 7:30. Go to Pray for Julius Jones, bit.ly, Pray for Julius Jones, and hang out with us. Get the marching orders. It's really important for us to appreciate that faith without works is dead. We are going to be laying out a strategy for the next week or two that will ensure that the governor's office in the state of Oklahoma is flooded with support and calls for the commutation and clemency of Julius Jones to be made reality. Contact the governor, call the governor, join the faith call tonight. Let's organize the church and save a Black man's life.
Thank you again, both of you, for being here. And we hope to have you back as we continue to cover, as you know, Antoinette, you've been very clear. This is not over. There are more steps to take, and we would love to have you back as this case goes on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you both.
Civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson was hospitalized after falling and hitting his head while attending a meeting at Howard University in Washington, D.C. on Monday, according to the Rainbow Push Coalition. Now, Jackson was on campus for a meeting with Howard University president and students to address the students' concerns about living conditions in their residential halls when he was injured, a statement from the coalition said. And they stated, when Reverend Jackson entered a building on campus, he fell and hit his head. His staff took him to the Howard University Hospital, where various tests were run, including a CT scan. The results came back normal. However, the hospital officials decided to keep Reverend Jackson overnight.